And before we get into the study, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the Confederation of Planets in service to the one infinite creator, and especially those of Ra, who have brought forward this material that we gather to study and to read. And I offer my deep gratitude to those entities, to all the efforts of our teachers, our guides, our allies, both seen and unseen, that support this working. We send love and light in recognition of our shared path of seeking the Creator. And I offer my thanks to all those entities who are here with us. Thank you.
Ditto.
So we are going to be studying session 5 today, which I think it may get the award for the fewest topics of all the sessions in all 106 sessions. It's very few topics, but certainly not the least significant session. It's very significant, actually. And the notes on topics that I wrote down are: 1, the relationship between the healer, the one who is healing, and how healing occurs. And then Don accepts the honor duty of learn teaching the healing process from Ra, and Ra proceeds with the associated primary lessons. And then the first 2 of the 3 areas of healing, mind and then body, and then finally a little bit of contact maintenance. So that's what we're up to today.
Very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad that's helpful. Is anyone interested in starting our reading? 5.0.
I can do it.
Okay, great. Thanks, BJ.
Session 5, January 23rd, 1981. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. The last time we communicated, we were speaking of learning of healing. It is my impression that from what you gave to us in the earlier session, that it is necessary to first purify the self by certain disciplines and exercises. Then, in order to heal a patient, it is necessary, by example, and possibly certain exercises, to create a mental configuration in the patient that allows him to heal himself. Am I correct? I am Ra. Although your learn, understanding, distortion is essentially correct, your choice of vibratory sound complex is not entirely as accurate as this language allows. It is not by example that the healer does the working. The working exists in and of itself. The healer is only the catalyst, much as this instrument has the catalysis necessary to provide the channel for our words. Yet, by example or exercise of any kind, can take no thought for this working. The healing working is congruent in that it is a form of channeling some distortion of the intelligent infinity. Continue.
Well, you know, there's not a
There's
whole lot
only
to read.
3 questions.
Yeah, let's just pause there and see that. I mean, even that, it seems to me that there's some things that we could try to unpack about the nature of healing. I'm curious if anyone has a sense of what's the major point that Ra's making here, that the healer does not heal by example. The working exists in and of itself. Any thoughts on that?
Last week, someone talked about Reiki. right? And
Yep.
like the light, well, I don't know very much about Reiki, but I think it's something like the energy flows through as a channel and then it goes wherever it's needed. It's not the healer, the person channeling the Reiki is just providing the channel. They don't decide where the energy goes. Is that somewhat related to this?
I think so. Yeah, I remember Reiki coming up last week. I don't remember who brought it up though. I think we have a few practitioners. Oh, it was you, Nia? Yeah.
Okay, I can chime in a bit. With Reiki specifically, the traditional method that is taught is it's called universal white light healing. And the idea is that the practitioner is filled with the white light, universal white light energy, and then it flows through us into the client wherever it deems necessary. So there are practitioners that get really focused on, like, say somebody has like a shoulder injury and will just aim like a fire hose blasting that area with white light energy, and that can be not necessarily what the creator has in mind. If that person's supposed to have that catalyst for a reason, then sometimes it can bring temporary relief, sometimes it can bring about a lot of images and or things that may have nothing to do with the shoulder itself. The creator may feel that, or their higher self may feel that they're better suited to work on an emotional component. So there's the emotional body, there's the spirit body, there's the physical body, and there's layers to that. However, in my advanced training, I've kind of let go of some of the traditional aspects of the Reiki and have kind of more of a higher self bringing about what wants attention, what's calling out, what's showing up that wants attention in that way. So in that sense, I'm not using the fire hose method at all. I'm purposely allowing the energy to flow through and into the client as universal white light energy, as the higher self feels is where it should go. Sorry, brain mind not working. I think you get the idea.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I want to share, I kind of want to stick up for Don a little bit. I mean, in a way, when I think of, what is healing, Ra says that healing is moving closer to the law of one, if I remember correctly. And so it's allowing the light of the creator to move up and into and through our energy bodies and our energy system with less and less resistance and less distortion. And the way that I hear Ra talking about the process of initiation for that healers go through, I understand that they have to learn how to clear their own distortions. Healers have to go through a process where they heal their own distortions and allow that process to take place. And so to the degree that they allow healing to take place within their own energy bodies, I kind of feel like Don's suggestion that they act as example isn't totally off, which isn't to say I disagree with Ra. I'm not saying that at all, but I just, to me, that it's a little confusing because I kind of take away from Ra's other descriptions of what healers go through to become effective healers. I don't know, it feels a little bit like there is something that they do that can be helpful as example if what they're doing, if they're present with a so-called patient and they're modeling the process of acceptance, allowance, and co-creating with the light that moves through us. And that does seem like it's a helpful process that a healer can offer a so-called patient or something. So anyway, just not necessarily pushing back a little bit, but just I just felt like I wanted to mention that. Okay, Fairlyn, welcome, Scott, and then Kent.
Yeah, just one thing
Fairlyn, you cut out. I don't know if you want to try doing audio only.
Can you hear me? Yeah, the video's off. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now, yes.
Okay, just a thought came up again this week is my Reiki teacher told me that the only thing that can really stop the Reiki from going through the practitioner is if they are thinking negatively, sort of gossipy thoughts. You know, if they can kind of stop the Reiki by judgmental negative thoughts, just to throw that in there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that insight. Kent?
Yeah, okay. So I'm sure there are ways for a person to open their channels for the healing to flow. And I know in Reiki, you do that, I don't know, with the help of a master, I guess, or something. You receive help to open your channels, I believe. I don't do it myself. But okay, but I read 101, and in there she describes how there's a different form of healing originating from the versus the chakra, the heart chakra. She said a healer can heal from their solar plexus yellow chakra by focusing their will on healing a certain body issue or an ailment. But usually such healing that comes from the will center does not last unless the person receiving it is ready for it to be permanent. Whereas healing that takes place from the heart chakra and the green center, that's just allowing the energy to flow and go into the recipient wherever it's needed, and just serve the highest good for that person's healing. So that sounds more like Reiki. Although Nia said the Reiki is white light. You know, I don't know what the difference is between the white light and the green light healing. But yeah, okay. That's my bit.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, Shang, and then BJ. Shang, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, last week, Ra was talking about the pyramid chamber being used for healing because or maybe no, that wasn't it, but the pyramid is used for healing. And then he was saying now instead of the pyramids, people can fulfill that role, which I assume is the healer. And my interpretation is that then the healer is supposed to somehow provide that energy channel for the healing. And then that combined with, I was trying to understand what he was talking about, like, yep, by example or exercise of any kind can take no thought for this working. So I think he's saying here that like Carla is being the channel she's the channel for this communication, but because she's like in trance, she's not doing anything by example or thinking. She's just, the energy is coming through her and then other people are receiving that. And so what I think I'm getting from this is that the healer is just supposed to be a channel for energy, and then that energy is supposed to do the healing. I think. But then I wasn't like, when I think of the pyramids, they had like humans helping with that healing, right? It wasn't just like they didn't just plop the person in the room and leave. I assume there was like some healer there also doing something. So I don't know. There's just a dump of random thoughts.
BJ?
Yeah, it sounds to me like we're all pretty much in agreement. I think the thing that I wanted to chime in about too is like, I get how the word example does make sense in terms of, well, I have this image that has stuck with me from reading through the material later. I don't know, maybe in like the 70s or something, session 70 something, maybe. Anyway, somewhere later-ish in the material, about the crystallized healer and the image of how the crystallized healer can sort of like turn on their full rainbow, like Care Bear stare kind of thing. And but I think the thing that isn't by example, that it seems like maybe we're all sort of in agreement about, is that it's without agenda. It's not like, I'm going to heal Aaron's liver now, or like know where the, Blu-ray needs to go for Aaron and then like do that by example, but rather just be as available as I'm able to be for the full rainbow to shine through me as unblocked as possible. And then that the light will do its own work and be received by Aaron or whoever as they're open to it and ready for it. So yeah, there is a way that example still makes sense to me, but I get how it's not, that it may be confusing. Yeah, I think there's significance to the role of the healer, but I think what Ra's pointing to is the kind of getting out of the way vibe that seems like we're all feeling.
Yeah, I just want to reply to what you said and what Shang said. The way that Shang, that you kind of like unpacked the metaphor they're drawing here with Carla, that's really helpful. To think that Carla is the one teaching the law of one, by example, is obviously mistaken. And so it's helpful to like break that down and be like, oh, right, it's the same thing with the healer. The healer is a channel, just like Carla is a channel for the healing or the teaching to come through. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Shang. Thanks for bringing that in. Nia?
So yes, I want to concur that the white light is actually the rainbow. So when I'm visualizing the white light, I'm seeing literal shimmers of all the colors really muted and within that light, and it is all color. So it's all the rays, it's all the spectrum of. And one of the things they taught, see, I've taken from two different teachers. The first one, I learned the traditional Western version where Takata brought it over to the US and taught it to Americans specifically in a very specific way, which is not how it was originally taught in Japan. And that teaching says that the universal white light will fill us up first, and it will deal with, if I'm having a liver issue, it's going to go to my liver first and deal. So anything I have going on emotionally, anything I have going on spiritually or energetically or anything is going to be the attention getter for the white light as the channel. So they teach it now where they're like, I literally had my first teacher was like, oh, you could do your grocery list in your head and the light's still going to do what it needs to do. And I never felt comfortable with that. And I get what she was saying, once you set the intention, it should follow through. But it didn't feel that way to me. The example portion of that could have to do with that, where it's as the healer practitioner is removing their blockages and we are a more clear flowing channel, it's less, it's like using a pipe, like a water pipe that's clogged. You know, it's like there could be some lack of flow because of a clog that isn't being dealt with in the channel that's being used. There is, to chime in on what Kent said, there is an attunement that you go through where it opens up the chakras in the hands and on the top of the head where it's in the heart space, where it's supposed to like be a white light waterfall that comes through and goes through the heart space and out the arms into the hands. And this other new method I've learned, the guy basically was like, I can do the attunement, but you don't need it. It's your intention setting is strong enough now. And he had a very non-traditional way of teaching. And it looks more like a QHHT session where your higher self or your astral self is dealing with the other person's spirit body in the, let's say, astral or ethereal planes, and meeting the person there. And a lot less of the traditional form comes into account there. It's felt a lot better that way since I've flipped over to that and gotten the mastery with that. It's nice. Not, the traditional way never sat right with me, and this has a completely different feel for myself and has a completely different feel for other people that have received it in their feedback. It's amazing. So I hope that helps.
Is it the traditional way, the Japanese one, or the Western one, or both?
Here in America, the traditional, as taught by Takata in like 1947, she came over from Japan to Hawaii and then to here. I think it was 47, and she is the one that broke it into the 3 levels and decided level 1, level 2, and level 3, which they call mastery, which there is no master. It's a very Japanese term to have mastery as stated that way. So beforehand, the original Usui method is that he would have 5 or 6, he would have people come to his clinic, and you would live there for 2 weeks, and you would have 5 or 6 practitioners with both hands on you at the same time, all around your body. So you would have 5 or 6 people Reikiing white light energy, Reikiing a person 5 times a day for 2 weeks. Very different than the one-off sessions that we have here. And so there wasn't 3 levels of it. There wasn't mastery. It's been stated that Takata brought what we know as Reiki to the US as a way of spreading it around the world, but also in a way that makes money. And looking at the history of I've read some books on Usui's methods versus how she changed that and broke it into the 3 levels. And you even threw in the word mastery in there to kind of like get people interested. And that's a whole other conversation, but the new way feels amazing as a practitioner and as the receiving.
Cool. Okay, anything else on 5.1 before we move on? Okay. 5.2, who would like to read?
I can read.
Great.
Questioner, we have decided to accept, if offered, the honor duty of learning, teaching the healing process. I would ask as to the first step which we should accomplish in becoming effective healers. I am Ra. We shall begin with the first of the 3 teachings learnings. We begin with the mental learned teachings necessary for contact with intelligent infinity. The prerequisite of mental work is the ability to retain silence of self at a steady state when required by the self. The mind must be open like a door. The key is silence. Within the door lies a hierarchical construction you may liken unto geography and in some ways geometry, where the hierarchy is quite regular, bearing inner relationships. To begin to master the concept of mental discipline, it is necessary to examine the self. The polarity of your dimension must be internalized. Where you find patience within your mind, you must consciously find the corresponding impatience and vice versa. Each thought that a being has in turn its antithesis. The disciplines of the mind involve, first of all, identifying both those things of which you approve and those things of which you disapprove within yourself, and then balancing each and every positive and negative charge with its equal. The mind contains all things. Therefore, you must discover this completeness within yourself. The second mental discipline is acceptance of the completeness within your consciousness. It is not for a being of polarity in the physical consciousness to pick and choose among attributes, thus building the roles that cause blockages and confusions in the already distorted mind complex. Each acceptance soothes part of the many distortions that the faculty you call judgment engenders. The third discipline of the mind is a repetition of the first, but with a gaze outward toward the fellow entities that it meets. In each entity, there exists completeness. Thus, the ability to understand each balance is necessary. When you view patience, you are responsible for mirroring in your mental understanding patience and impatience. When you view impatience, it is necessary for your mental configuration of understanding to be impatience patience. We use this as a simple example. Most configurations of mind have many facets, and understanding of either self-polarities or what you would call other self-polarities can and must be understood as subtle work. The next step is the acceptance of other self-polarities, which mirrors the second step. These are the first 4 steps of learning mental discipline. The 5th step involves observing the geographical and geometrical relationships and ratios of the mind, the other mind, the mass mind, and the infinite mind. The second area of learned teaching is the study understanding of the body complexes. It is necessary to know your body well. This is a matter of using the mind to examine how feelings, the biases, what you would call the emotions, affect various portions of the body complex. It shall be necessary to both understand the bodily polarities and to accept them, repeating in a chemical physical manifestation the work you have done upon the mind, bethinking the consciousness. The body is a creature of the mind's creation. It has its biases. The biological bias must be first completely understood, and then the opposite bias allowed to find full expression in understanding. Again, the process of acceptance of the body as a balanced as well as polarized individual may then be accomplished. It is then the task to extend this understanding to the bodies of the other selves whom you will meet. The simplest example of this understanding is the understanding that each biological male is female, each biological female is male. This is a simple example. However, in almost every case wherein you are attempting the understanding of the body of self or other self, you will again find that the most subtle discernment is necessary in order to fully grasp the polarity complexes involved. At this time, we would suggest closing the description until the next time of work so that we may devote time to the third area commensurate with its importance. We can answer a query if it is a short one before we leave this instrument.
Great, thank you. So that's a lot.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yep. It's a lot to unpack.
Hey, yeah, you were talking about like you moved away from the traditional into the non-traditional, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around like the key differences of what's the difference. Like you said before, it was like you were taught that like it just does whatever, and you can make a laundry list in your head and it still works. But now you're saying the difference is there's some interaction on the higher level between healer and the patient. Is that what you, could you sort of like repeat the main differences?
Yeah, I'll make it short because, and if you have more questions, you can message me outside. But so as stated, the way it was taught before, the white light channel comes through the heart and then out the hands because they've been attuned and opened the energy points for that, to allow it to be a reed or a water pipe. So a lot of people use it as, like I said, a fire hose method and just kind of blast the area. My teacher also said you could be doing your laundry list in your head and not be paying attention. The way that I do it now, I'm meeting my client's spirit body in the ethereal, and my spirit body comes forward. And I receive random images and random things. The example that my teacher gave me was that a person's father figure was continuously near the foot of the client. All of a sudden, a fish appeared in his mouth. A fish appeared in the healer's practitioner's mouth, and he had the sense to give it to the father as an offering. And that did not make sense to the practitioner, but it made perfect sense to the client. A lot of times I go in and clean up chakras. I personally do what's called shamanic. I remove a lot of negative gunk out, and that's more of a shamanic practice. But yeah, you can message me after class about that, if you're still wanting to know.
Thanks. The reason I was asking was this, when I was going through this the first, I mean, he talks about like first you have to clear yourself, and then you project that same, like you view the other person with the same sort of balancing, and that's sort of what I was wondering, like because when you described the first step, it seemed very like, oh, you're not even considering the other person, you're just being the channel. But then when you were talking about the like the non-traditional way, it seems more involved with like actually interacting and viewing the other self. That's why I just wanted to understand
very
it better.
involved and very active. In fact, the sessions only last about 35 minutes because I'm fully concentrated and active the entire time. A lot can get done in a short amount of time, and I only go where I'm led. I don't go in with necessarily an agenda. I always put it as highest and best good, that nothing that I feel attention towards or called to do can offset anybody's catalyst or purpose or things that need to be there. So it's always for highest and best good as well.
Thanks.
Kent?
Yes, I want to bring up something I thought was very interesting here. On page 52, first paragraph, third sentence, the disciplines of the mind involve, first of all, identifying both those things of which you approve and those things of which you disapprove within yourself, and then balancing each and every positive and negative charge with its equal. The mind contains all things. Therefore, you must discover this completeness within yourself. And then if we jump to the third paragraph, again, third sentence. Thus, the ability to understand each balance is necessary. When you view patience, you are responsible for mirroring in your mental understanding patience, impatience. When you view impatience, it is necessary for your mental configuration of understanding to be impatience, patience. So I found that very interesting. That Ra is suggesting we balance not only the negative, but they're suggesting we should also balance the positive. I just found that very interesting.
Hmm.
So whenever we experience patience, they are suggesting we should also reflect on the potential within ourselves to be impatient. So we are aware of that. I don't think they're saying that we should act out impatience, but when we have the positive qualities, we should also reflect on the potential of having the negative qualities within ourselves.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really key concept that they're getting across. This is from the second paragraph. The polarity of your dimension must be internalized.
Mhm.
Like that's the synopsis of the whole thing that they're describing after that. The polarity of your dimension must be internalized.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd like to
Welcome,
get into
Yuri.
that. Hi, Yuri.
Hi, Yuri.
Let's see. Let's pause the stack for a second and see if there's any direct feedback or comments on this point that Kent is bringing up. Does anyone want to comment on either the process of balancing any concept that we experience in our mind with its opposite, or the idea that we don't just apply that method to negative mental experiences, also to sort of quote unquote positive. BJ, you want to respond?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I can also include what I was going to say, so take myself from the stack. Yeah, I really am intrigued by that part as well. And what it means to me is the process of releasing identity, and that any fixed quality would be what we are. The basic practice that I've been facilitating on Thursdays, the Inquiring Together, one of the most profound inquiries that I went through was on questioning one of my positive qualities, like looking at what happens when I believe the thought I'm kind. And this was years ago, but it like blew my mind that like when it showed me identity. It showed me like when I have a concept of myself as kind, it actually takes me away from the true kindness that I am, and it becomes an image of kindness. So anyway, that's the basic thing that I get from that, is like being able to experience the self as the undifferentiated and unlimited presence, rather than the qualified presence that we can experience ourselves as through the different qualities that we take on and wear in different moments throughout the day. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Scott, was your hand up for a response to Kent's this topic, or did you have a new?
It was up before that, but it's relative to the thoughts on my mind are relative to that question.
Okay. Well, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah. So, and, in listening to that, reading in that particular part of it, it conjured up different things for me. And so like I have been very present to, or one of the things I've been present to over the last year or so is what I call the paradoxical nature of everything. As soon as I perceive something one way, its opposite is also present. It seems like that's constantly occurring for me. And I'm like, and so it's an interesting observation to make of oneself, to be caught in the polarity, right? Could be pulled over to one polarity, pulled over to one polarity or the other polarity. And to just practice, awareness of that. And maybe not having so many bitching sessions or like things that I get into like, regularly, somewhat regularly, which I do. At least I'm laughing about it now. But another thing that occurs to me is like holding the paradox. Like being able to hold the paradox, standing in the paradox without being pulled over to one polarity or the other. And kind of like BJ was saying, like the observer, the witness, and like releasing the grip of one identity or the other. And then I thought about this, one of my favorite poems ever written of all time by Rilke. And I don't want to quote the whole thing, but I'll just say the last maybe two stanzas of it, because it's always spoken to this for me. And it says, to work with things in the indescribable relationship is not too hard for us. The patterns grow more intricate and subtle, and being swept along is not enough. Take your practice powers and stretch them out until they span the chasm between two contradictions, for the God wants to know itself in you. And that poem has been a kind of God, what's the terminology I'm looking for? Like a beacon or lighthouse or something, like something that rang truth to me through so consistently through so many things that I remember the whole thing word for word. There's two other stanzas before that, but yeah, I guess that's the challenge or the practice. Those are my thoughts.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that poem. If you can, I'd love for you to share that on the thread. Be nice to have that written down. That's so relevant. It feels so relevant to this discussion.
On
Thanks.
the thread being like the Telegram.
Yep.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, if whatever, if it's
Oh
easy.
no, I'm happy to, for sure. I will.
Cool.
I just popped it in the chat too, if anybody wants to look at it right now.
Thanks, PJ. Sean?
I don't know if Neil dropped. I don't know if he had his hand up for me. I don't know if he had something to say.
He did at one point.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, kind of in a dead zone, so I may drop out again. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I was thinking the exercise that Ra was talking about, and an image of Eckhart Tolle popped up. So I was wondering if it's just another way of potentially removing the ego, removing the story that we have been telling ourselves, I guess. Another way of putting it, maybe. So I thought.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And just a personal response to that, I think it's removing the ego and also investigating the potential for ego or the potential for identity.
Okay. Sean, did you want to go now?
Yeah. So a while ago, someone posted on the Telegram like some article on like the Daily Beast about like space and time being illusions. I forgot who posted that, but that's like been popping up a lot on my YouTube. So like apparently now like the new boundary of physics is so I guess the current like paradigm of physics is that like space and time are like foundational concepts, but now like the new boundary of new physics is that space and time are byproducts. They're not real, they're imaginary, and they're byproducts of like some more fundamental force. So in a sense, like science is catching up with like spirituality, but like thinking through that framework, I think it it's interesting to me because when I think through that framework, it's like a quantifiable way of measuring like reality being a byproduct of like your consciousness. And in that way, when I see Ra saying like all these charges, you have to balance the positive negative charge, I think I see it as a literal, like you can quantifiably measure, like when you hold on to a belief that you view as positive, like good, inherently good or bad, that's automatically creating a charge. And that affects, in a way, like the magnetic field of like how your reality manifests. So like in a way, I think like Ra can actually see it's easier for me to understand because that's just, I like to think in terms of like quantifiable metrics, but I imagine like Ra can look at an entity and see like when they hold on to certain beliefs, there's like, you can literally see like the charges associated with that affecting the reality around them. That's how I'm seeing this. That was all.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate all that. That stimulates a lot of insight for me. Okay, well, I've been bookmarking a few things. So let me share. Okay, so one thing, this is kind of building off of what BJ was saying. And so in the practice that BJ facilitates, it's based on the work of Byron Katie. And I've also studied with Byron Katie and went and taken the intensive with her. And one of the things I appreciate so deeply about her her teaching is, you know, you can recognize a teacher for their power and know that they have, you know, that oh, I should follow this person, they can teach me something, or, you know, I can gain something by being around this person just because of their, you know, charisma or their power. And that's, I think that's a lot of how people who are studying something or pursuing something stay with it, is that they just follow their teacher. But what Byron Katie helps people do is she says, don't trust me. Don't trust what I say. Don't trust what I'm telling you. Just notice in your own experience what happens when you question your thoughts, which is this process. Questioning your thoughts is this process that Ra's describing. So, you know, we come in contact with a thought, it's polarized, so that let's call it impatience. It causes us discomfort or maybe even suffering. And she teaches the process of, all right, well, let's question it. Let's question it, you know, let's question the situation around which impatience arises. And it's so obvious when you notice what happens when we notice what happens for us when we do this process that Ra is describing. It hurts less. Like when we're in a state of mind where we're kind of believing a polarized thought, usually in what we consider a negative one, it hurts. We feel it in our body, we feel it in our emotions, we feel it in all sorts of ways. And as soon as we allow ourselves to go through the process of noticing what it's like to believe it, and then noticing what it's like to be either with its opposite or just without it, it's a really palpable and tangible way to see the value of this work. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated or abstract, and you don't have to follow a teacher. Once you experience it, once you experience the process of being with your mind as it's believing a stressful thought, and then being with your mind in the absence of believing that stressful thought, it's a really distinct and very easy to experience contrast. Anyway, so that all came up for me in the context of like, well, you know, it's not easy to do this necessarily, and it's subtle work, as Ross says. So it's like, well, what gives us the motivation to stick with it, I guess, is what I'm trying to address. And I want to just put a plug in for like, well, we can directly experience the benefit of it, you know, just like through, well, does it hurt or does it feel better when when you go through the process of, you know, revisiting the polarities of mind. And it's quite helpful to notice that in my experience and in my opinion. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say is, and this is edgy, just our capacity to be with darkness, our capacity to be with what we consider evil, our capacity to be with all the things in the world that we wish didn't exist because they're so awful. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to invite ourselves into the process of being without pushing it away and without resisting it, the quote unquote darkness or evil that exists in third density, which is another way of saying it's in our own mind, because it's a shared mind. And let's see, the polarity of your dimension must be internalized. Well, guess what? That includes all the darkness. We have to internalize it. We have to realize, oh, it's part of God's mind. It's part of my mind. And this is something that comes up a lot in New Age, especially in New Age spirituality, this whole idea of love and light only. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. That's really unbalanced. We need to have the courage to witness darkness within ourselves as well as within the world, and not flinch from it and not run from it, and figure out how to place it within a context of how is it all me? How is it all connected? Because without that, we'll stay fractured. There's no way to wholeness without contemplating darkness. Anyway, so I just wanted to share that too. There's a lot of other things I want to say, but that's enough for now. Lower my hand.
I really appreciate that piece about being with darkness and not just being in the love and light only. And I think sometimes the biggest advances in my life on my spiritual journey happen because I'm able to welcome and be with some challenge that's here, and then sit with it, welcome it, see it, understand it, and then grow beyond it, rather than feeling something is there and then chasing the light, in a way, trying to find the gift or the blessing or anyway, it just really resonates for me, being able to practice unconditional love.
Yeah. Nia?
So for me, I can get really almost in a neutral state in meditation and do what I call zoom out, where I'm just, working on the feelings of one with the creator and everything existing at the same time and things like that. And it's only then that I can be that just zoomed out to incorporate all as a neutral, balanced perspective. Then I believe it was Matthias DeStefano talked about the Confederation and said something about one of their that humans in third density, rather than all the many other beings of higher density, look at us as unevolved, and our emotions around these things, our I think he said a human laugh, because they've debated having humans from Earth as part of the Confederation, and that a human laugh is enough to give a heart attack to another species, and that we're one of the few species that has the capacity for this much joy and this much suffering, that we're unique in that a lot of other species are not, or other densities are almost envious, and that higher densities choose to incarnate in third density to have this extreme dualistic experience. And and then secondly with that, it's the yin and yang, the yin yang, the male female, the dark light, the positive, negative, there's just a cave versus a tree. Like there's so much, dualism in nature that may or may not have feeling around, that may or may not have such a response of suffering to, and that kind of goes in alignment with the level of acceptance and seeing that, just again working on zooming out and detaching from. But then we have to re-engage, and we wake up every day and we're in this, how do we deal with that, where we have some goal to be not third density, and yet here we are experiencing it to such an extreme, and it's not in balance to be in love light only all the time. But I do believe that that's part of a pendulum swing, just like the feminist movement is an extreme pendulum swing on the other side, because we've had energies on the patriarchal for so long that it's swung over. And I was there for a little while myself, and very yin and feminine energy concentrated, and then I was like, this isn't balanced. It doesn't feel balanced at all. And looking at sacred masculine and sacred feminine in balance is all green ray stuff anyway. And just how do we deal with our own existence and our own duality in this way when we're being taught to rise above it at the same time and evolve out of it? I don't know. Big inquiries.
Yep. Totally. I feel you on that. So I want to make space for anybody who hasn't spoken or hasn't spoken much. If anybody wants to say anything, I want to make sure that there's room for your voice, all of the voices here. Any questions or comments from anyone?
I have a interesting fact that I learned this weekend. My dad said when he was in Egypt a couple months back, he was with a tour guide who is, I guess you have to be certified as an Egyptologist, and there's like 15,000 of them. He's number 85, so he's been doing this stuff for like 35 years. And a cool fact that he told me was that all the faces on the gods are depicted in a way that they're looking straight forward and not smiling, not frowning, but kind of just in a state of calm confidence. And that's when they mastered their mind, body, spirit through, I'm assuming, similar techniques of making each side that they live and handle every situation.
I couldn't
we-
understand the last couple sentences.
We're losing you, Neil.
They look straight ahead. I kind of lost it there.
It's too bad too. That sounded really interesting when you were talking.
It sure
about.
did. Sounded really good. Oh, we lost him completely. Maybe when he comes back, he can tell us.
Yeah.
Or you can type it up in the group chat for us. I
think he's driving.
Yeah, I mean, when he gets home or tomorrow.
Oh yeah. Good point.
Super random side note. I've never had the interest in going to Egypt, which is kind of shocking that that's true, until recently. Now, like all of a sudden, I'm just like, I need to get over there. I need to go see what's going on in those pyramids. Field trip.
Yeah. Okay. I have something that went through my mind when he said about the gods just looking straight forward without a frown and without a smile. They're in that neutral state. That made me think of what the dog whisperer said. What's his name? Julius. I don't know. No, Caesar. His last name is Caesar. I can't remember his first name. He said, what dogs look for in a leader is someone who exudes calm assertiveness, I think he said. So when he described those gods without a frown or a smile, that sounded to me like calm assertiveness. Anyway, just a side note.
Yeah, it reminded me of crystallized healer. Ross says,
Right.
perfectly balanced entity has no emotional reaction to any situation except for love.
Right.
It's like, whoa.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we get into this body section, the second area of the healing training. Body. I mean, I think we've touched on the mind and the mental process of balancing polarities and internalizing the polarities that exist within our mental process. Let's discuss the body, how that applies to the body. To me, it's a little less clear. It's a little less, it gets a little more mysterious somehow. So I'd like to discuss it. The second area of learned teaching is the study understanding of the body complexes. It is necessary to know your body well. This is a matter of using the mind to examine how the feelings, the biases, which you would call the emotions, affect various portions of the body complex. It shall be necessary to both understand the bodily polarities and accept them. Repeating in a chemical physical manifestation the work you have done upon the mind, bethinking the consciousness. Does anyone have any insights on that they could share?
So something that comes to mind, I don't know how related this is. There's some actress who was talking. She was talking about she goes through depression a lot, and she realized that at some point she realized, oh, it's because of my genetics. Like my genetics make me prone to going through this. And she Kirsten Bell, like the super happy actress. And then she was on like she does a lot of talks now on that topic, basically saying like, hey, like when this happens, I remember to tell myself like, hey, this is my body reacting. It's not necessarily like something's wrong with me. It's not like necessarily like, oh, there's something wrong in my life that I should be depressed about. It's just my body is going through a certain imbalance. This is genetic, and I have learned strategies to deal with this. So like she was going on talks to help young girls and like other people like how to deal with like these kind of like issues. And I wonder if that like that's an extreme case, but I wonder if like for any kind of bias, like if our bodies are tuned for certain things, to realize like that's just how your body is tuned.
Yeah, just real quick, I want to respond directly to that, which is that supports this notion that Ross seems to be talking about our emotions as a portion of the work of the body, which is interesting. Okay, so we got a stack: Kent, and then Scott, and then BJ.
Okay, so yeah, this is something I've been working on myself as part of my internal process for a very long time. Reflecting, I have diabetes, for example, and I've been meditating on that and reflecting on that for decades. So diabetes is an inability to process carbohydrates, especially sugars. Sugars representing the sweetness of life, especially in the form of love. but also other forms of sweetness of life. So with diabetes, it reflects an inability to process the sweetness of life. Taking it in a healthy and good and balanced way. But then as I reflected more on it, I also came to realize that what the sugar does in the body is the cells convert it to energy. So it always also relates to power and the ability to convert love into power, or the ability to well, basically the conclusion I came to after many years of meditating on it was that it's the most, at the deepest, most fundamental level, it's a fear of handling the power that comes with being a lovable person. Because when you're a lovable person, you influence people just by the power of them loving you. You have an influence on them, and that's a form of power. And so for me, I don't know if it's the same for all diabetics, but for me, the deepest level of that issue is a fear of the power that I have over other people if they love me. So yeah, that's just one of the things. I mean, I reflect on other body issues too, of course. And
Oopsies.
am I back?
Oh, you're back. You dropped
Yeah, I
off.
dropped out. Am I back? Okay, yeah. Yeah, my connection broke there for a second. So yeah, I co-authored this book with my wife, with my ex-wife and a friend of ours, William Schaefer. A large section, it's called Illuminating Physical Experience. And a large section of the book is actually about this issue, the relationship between our emotions and body, physical issues and how they relate to different emotions. So yeah. Anyway, that's it.
Wow, Ken,
That's something I've been working
that's
on.
awesome.
I saw Diana made a emoji face of like, wow. Maybe you could share that in the chat,
Yeah.
the Telegram.
Share what?
The
The name
book.
of the book.
Okay, yeah. It'll be hard to find. We printed it in 1999, and I don't know if you can find it. I still have a few copies if anybody wants one. Yeah, I'll share it. All right, cool.
Cool. Thank you. Scott?
Unmute. Yeah, let's see. So yeah, there was part of that I'm still trying to figure out too. I'll try to go back and look at too. But you know, again, it's like as we're reading through the material, or you were rereading it this time, it, you know, it just conjures like certain thoughts for me. It brings up different things. And I was thinking about the Japanese Emoto with the water studies and the crystalline structure, and the power of thought to change the crystalline structure of water molecules. And so I was thinking about it in that way, or on that level, like our thoughts, you know, and our thoughts are fueled by emotions. And so there's a relationship and a communication going on between the mind and the body's receiving those. And there was another thing. What was I thinking about? Oh, so years ago, I took this class with Barbara Marks Hubbard through the Shift Network called Agents of Conscious Evolution. It was really cool and really fun. It's like a 6-month program. And that was the first time I had heard that our words can affect our DNA. And apparently there's science around that too. So I guess most of the time I forget that and not really like maybe being a little bit more mindful or cautious with my words or something, or my internal dialogue for sure around with myself. But those were the two things that kind of like came up for me in the reading. And so I just thought about it, was thinking about that. But there was let me just find the part. It shall be necessary to both understand the bodily polarities and to accept them, repeating in a chemical, physical manifestation the work you have done upon the mind, rethinking the consciousness. I'm still a bit unclear about what that's saying. And that's all I want to say about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take a quick pass at trying to see if I'll comment and see if this helps. The second area of the, focusing on the body complex, it's still a mental process. So we're talking, we're looking at the body and its functions and its sensations and our emotions, but we're still doing the work. The healing work on the body is mental. So we're contemplating the polarities of the body. And we're finding the balance through that process mentally. So that's one thing that comes to mind.
Okay, so can I respond to that? Because
Yeah.
it just brought something into my awareness, is which the body has consciousness on a cellular level. The creative intelligence is within it, like the body has consciousness and awareness. So there's an interchange. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yep,
Whereas
absolutely.
typically I just perceive the body as a thing, or like a same thing with a tree, a thing, or a rock, a thing. But it's bestowed, it's all bestowed with the creative intelligence within it, just like how they built the pyramids through the communicating with the consciousness of stone, or whatever they said.
That's right. Yep. Well, and the other two quick little comments I want to make responding to you, Scott, is we think about the body and the mind as these two fairly distinct things. And it's my understanding that the body and the mind and the spirit are all interpenetrated. You actually can't, when if you went to try to find a distinction, you wouldn't be able to find a distinct edge between any of those three aspects of ourself. They're in fact quite interpenetrated. And then the piece that they say, the body is a creature of the mind's creation. That's a really important point. The mind creates the body. And so of course, our words and our thoughts and our mental movements would have an impact on our body. Of course they would, because the mind is creating the body, creates the body.
Similar to at first there was the word or the thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the greater mind, the mind of God.
Yeah.
Which I guess we could argue exists in the unmanifest, manifests things into form.
Right. And that is our mind, because we are God. It's not separate.
There's no separation.
Yeah. Okay, so BJ, you got your hand up, and then Sean.
Okay, this is fun. So I want to talk about, just I guess the topic that's up right now, but that paragraph about the second area of learned teaching is the study understanding of the body complexes. And one thing that I have learned through my journey of like one of my main spiritual practices is meditative self-inquiry. What I've come to understand is there can be like a thought complex that I have worked through and that I don't believe anymore, that I'm not interested in anymore, but my body can still carry it. And it seems as though like the body is the mind, but kind of more dense. So it processes things more slowly. And so I will have processed something and I don't have mental charge, but my body can have charge. Like, one of the areas of my life where I get triggered the most is in my interactions with Aaron, and being in a romantic relationship together, things can come up. And so I can feel like something really come up in my body. And then there's the opportunity to check and see if I'm interested in that. Like it can carry with it kind of remnants of like, oh, believe like that wasn't fair, or I'm not being respected, or whatever thing might come up. But if I don't check to see if that's alive for me, like I can just kind of go through the motions of just like, oh, I'm offended or I'm hurt or I'm, whatever, because it's there in the body. But yeah, I just find that to be super fascinating, that the body can continue to carry something even after, like if I go and check, I'm like, oh, I'm not offended or whatever, whatever the thing is, and then just make space for the body to process it. It just needs a minute to kind of like shake it off. And then like a lot of times the next time, like if I'm able to do that consciously and like, again, welcome the experience of the body without taking it personally, then the next time it won't come up as much. So that's one of the ways that I take that like to understand the feelings, because a feeling is usually a response to the meaning that we're making of something. But the feeling can even linger after the meaning is gone. So that was a thought that I wanted to throw in there.
Thank you. That's fascinating. That's very stimulating for me, hearing all that. It's bringing me to mind of the portion of the material we're in. For those who are studying the Secret of Light, Walter Russell is kind of unpacking the difference between thinking and sensing and knowing, and what is the role of the body and what is the role of the brain and how is it different from mind, and all these distinctions. And it's fascinating. It's so interesting to like pay attention to things that we don't tend to pay attention to more closely. Anyway, that's really interesting, BJ. Thanks for sharing that. I think Sean was next. I don't know, Scott, is your hand still up from before, or did you have something else? Okay, Sean?
I want to build on what BJ said because I think it's really relevant. So like this whole passage, I think the point of this is to become a clear channel for intelligent energy. So like step one, clear your mind so that you can clearly channel the one energy. And then next is the body. So the body has its biases, which so step one is to recognize those biases. So like, hey, yes, my body tends to like react in this way to certain stimuli. And in order to continue channeling clearly, I think Ross saying like, hey, you have to recognize that this is a bias and then like balance it consciously. So one of my questions, BJ, you talked about this, which is like, is the goal here to like, let's say like whenever this happens, you get angry and that's just a property of your body. And so is the goal here to like recognize it and then consciously like to be able to remain neutral, like you consciously recognize that and then you let it go? Or is like at some point do you like address, is the goal to just like balance that using your mind and recognize that like, hey, this is a conscious body of my body, this is just a bias of my body? Or like BJ, you're saying like at some point it stops, you stop reacting in that way. Like is the goal to eventually turn your body in a way that like can you get rid of the biases in your body, or is that just something you recognize and then you sort of try to counterbalance?
I have not succeeded in getting rid of biases, all biases in my body, but it does seem like through my intensive study of mystics who like to talk about these things, that yeah, they pass on, that we stop taking them personally. And I think the way that we stop taking them personally is know yourself, accept yourself. So accepting that there's anger is, or whatever arises, is a big step, right? Like again, like what Aaron was saying about being able to be with the, quote, darkness rather than going off and chasing the light. Because when we avoid something, that's a way of believing that I'm threatened by it. What I am is threatened by this anger or whatever. And so that's not fundamentally true. Like what we are is not inherently threatened or impacted negatively by whatever arises. So the transmutation, I find, comes through acceptance and unconditional love. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my take.
Yeah, I think that's because what doesn't he say, like you don't choose, like you don't get to choose your biases or something, but it seems like you can work through them. Is what's being
Right.
implied here.
And speaking of poems, that brings to mind The Guest House from Rumi, and I'll put that one in the chat.
Yeah, it's super relevant. That's a good one. Thanks. Shang, I wanted to respond to something you said in the beginning of your last share. You're talking about, okay, the first step is to be able to retain silence of self at a steady state. And then you said something about, you know, why that's important. And I don't disagree with why that's important, but there's another piece to me that feels really relevant just through my own experience of, you know, like my angle of trying to do this work, this balancing work. I have found a tremendous amount of inner resistance to doing the work. Like the mind itself, or the patterns of what we call ego, sometimes seems so like independently willful to not be seen or not be transcended or not be like there's a self-protective mechanism to beliefs themselves, like thought forms, like have their own intelligence, seemingly. And so in order to like do the work, especially as it gets more subtle, do this balancing work, whether it's in the mind or the body, or especially of the spirit, it requires it requires a kind of focus that I think is what Ra's pointing to when they say that the prerequisite of mental work is the ability to retain silence of self at a steady state. Because what's the contrast to that? The contrast is the mind flares up, presents a lot of information, a lot of images. And if we just follow them, then we're not able to stay in the work. And so the prerequisite of the mind being silent has to do with being able to like follow through on the gesture of what this healing work is about. I think that's my take on that part.
Yuri's asking about how to do balancing work. I think that's a lot of what 5.2 is about, right? The balancing of the polarities in your mind.
Yeah. BJ, I honestly think you're the expert at this process. Do you want to attend to that question? So Yuri asked the question, could you please share more how you do balancing work?
I mean, what I can speak to is my practice with the lineage of the work of Byron Katie, which is what we've been practicing on Thursdays in the Inquiring Together calls. So that's basically one of the ways that I see it is coming to understand what the veil is, like understand the impact that thoughts and mental concepts have on our beingness, and through a practice of being with thoughts intentionally and then being without them, like being in stillness without them, then we can start to sort of separate and see the difference between the concepts and more essentially what our nature is. And I'm not an expert in Ra's teaching of the balancing, but I have found a lot of parallels between how they talk about it and the practice that is my mainstay.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that one more piece. So the work of Byron Katie that BJ's practicing and facilitating is holding the presence of a stressful thought, or really the presence of anything, the presence of any belief. And then in counterpose to that, sort of the absence of it, or the release from that belief. And I'm very curious about, to me, it feels like that process is completely congruent with this teaching, but I also think there's a distinction that Ra talks about, like contraposing opposite concepts, opposite qualities. And I think there is something that's somewhat unique about that, which is really trying to experience or fully understand that there is no possibility of experiencing patience without there also being the existence of impatience. Nothing that we can experience could be experienced unless its opposite was also available. Like every quality requires a splitting from wholeness into two opposite qualities. That's how the entire duality of the universe works. And we can grok that, we can perceive that, we can contemplate that, we can see it for ourselves, that that's how it is. And when we do that, we reduce our distortion, we reduce our sense of separation, and we attune naturally to wholeness and to the fact that patience, impatience are connected, like metaphysically. All opposites are connected and they require each other. You can't experience light without darkness. You can't experience anything without its opposite. And I think that's a pretty substantial part of what Ra's teaching about, is that we need to come into our own direct connection with that, knowing that all opposites are actually and in fact inextricably linked with one another. But in our normative consciousness, what we tend to do is get fixated on just one half of what in fact is a paired whole through its opposite. And they're saying, like, notice that, like, sit with that, meditate on that, find that for yourself. And as you do that, the charge that comes with believing the one half of it, whether it's positive or negative, reduces, and the emotional reactivity reduces, and we become more and more in touch with reality. All right, friends, we are upon our final time. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say or ask before we close? Any burning comments?
I have a personal comment,
Mm-hmm.
just to say I really appreciate this study, and that my poison ivy didn't bother me because the study was so engaging. Thank you.
Yay, that's wonderful. Yuri?
Hi everyone. I thought that we are starting the regular time, but it seems you had time shift, so I missed quite some part. And I would offer to go for this session for one more time, because I find it's very practical and applicable to the daily life, so to say, and like in comparison to the most of material, which is I find more theoretical, this is very practical. So maybe it would be great to spend one more meeting with this session number 5.
Yeah, my apologies, Yuri, for
Neil
the time
gave a heart
change.
to that.
What did you say, BJ?
Neil gave a heart to that, and Rachel thumbs up. Just
Yeah.
to say.
Yep. Apologies for the confusion about the time shift. It confused me too. And yeah, we could have done a better job of communicating that we're on a weird
No problem. No
shift.
problem. I can watch the video later,
Right.
so it's not a problem. But I think it's very good to go deeper in something we can really practice. Not only learning and thinking, reading and thinking, but really practice.
Yeah, that's a great point. Nia?
Diana was first, and I just have a small comment.
Thanks, Nia. I'm not keeping track. A couple things I wanted to share. Before we started recording, I shared that I had been feeling sad because I had hurt the feelings of someone I love. And during the course of this call, that person was it was my son. I'm sure he's fine with me sharing that. And he was overhearing this call, and we were both sort of steeping in the vibrations of this call. And then we had this beautiful heart sharing resolution hug that I felt so good about. And I feel like it was facilitated by the energy of this call. So thank you. Another thing I wanted to share was that I have always been so eager for him to study the material, but also trying so hard to be dispassionate about that, as Ra advises. He has his own books. I don't ask him whether he's reading them. Occasionally he'll pop in with a question or something. He clearly has like the soul of someone who just grasps the law of one at the deepest level. And well, I can't judge that really, but you know what I mean. And as you guys were reading, he was finishing the sentences from memory. And I was just totally blown away at how much of this like vernacular and specificity of this stuff he has in his head. So you see, you never know when you love something and you do your best to live something and someone knows it's important to you, they may not give you any indication that they're completely tuning in, but wow. So that was pretty cool. Thanks, BJ. And I heard Yuri say he would love to dedicate more time. I think he was talking specifically about balancing work. Is that true, Yuri? Are you able to or was it more than that?
Balancing work is very interesting as well, but I thought I meant the fifth session in general with working with body, spirit, and mind. Got
it. Yeah, that appeals to me too. And I also just want to express that I got a lot out of BJ's Inquiring Together group the other night, and that is definitely an approach to balancing, as we were just talking about. And I know that it's hard to keep track of all these things and what they mean, so I'm just putting it out there again that that is an approach to balancing that is available, and I'm enjoying it. So thank you everyone. This has been a wonderful call. I really have. I needed it. Thank you. I'm done.
Diana, that was awesome. I loved hearing the shift in your voice from the beginning to now too. And that was just, we missed your face, but that was just, I love what was happening for you for that. Everything meant to be. I also want to chime in on BJ's Inquiring Together, because that is, I am absolutely loving that. Is exactly, I was going to say this earlier and I forgot. Our theme for this month for the collective being meditation, and all the other works acceptance with a capital A. Like we're deepening into the material in a lot of various ways, but it's all interwoven and connected, and that was perfect. But the quick small thing I wanted to say was, y'all, we get more than one lifetime for this. I know we're all like, so I have to remind myself this, and I know Erin said this before too. It's like, I feel like I need to get it all done this lifetime. Right now, yesterday, 10 years ago, I needed it all completed and understood and balanced. And this is soul's growth. This is many lifetimes of an arc, and we get to ride this wave of leveling up with the planet right now and our fellow other selves. And I personally had to just take a second and breathe with that, because I caught myself getting really fixated on like, I got to get this done now. I need to understand this immediately, and we get more time. I just wanted to throw that in there as a little soothing balm for those of us who get mind crunchy around it. And thank you all for today.
Thanks,
it was awesome.
Yeah, super juicy session. I'll put a poll on Telegram to see if folks in fact do want to commit to revisiting this session again next week. I tend to want to keep us moving through the material, because this is not the last time we come across these concepts and these teachings of balancing. So, but I'm open to it. I really want this, I want what we focus on to be a reflection of what people are truly interested in. So I'll put a poll up and we'll see how that goes. And in terms of people plugging the Thursday night inquiring together, I am assuming that Yuri is fast asleep. I think it's deep in the night for Yuri when that happens, because he's across the world. But yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway,
Yuri.
thank you all so much for a really stimulating and enjoyable study session and conversation. We are complete. Till next time. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you, Aaron and BJ and everybody.
Thank you all.
Yay, bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.